Hey guys, Daddy-O here from Dadventure TV for an overview of the 2019 Bronson, also known as the V3 or version 3. I just wanted to give you an overview of what my thoughts were after having demoed it for a day up in the mountains. So the general words that I would use to describe the new Bronson are do it all, fun, and confidence inspiring. I say do it all because it really does climb well, descend excellent, pedals efficiently, handles gnar, rails turns. It really is a bike that you could probably use as a one bike do-it-all kind of bike, from everything from your daily riding to bike parks, excluding probably just downhill, completely downhill oriented race courses or cross-country races. Other than that, it's pretty much a do-it-all bike. It is fun because it is very poppy, it is very agile, and just allows you to just really have a lot of fun on the bike. You can hit those little pops and rollers along the trail when you're out there just to have some fun. You see a rock and you go drop off of it just for kicks. It definitely allows you to do all that kind of stuff. And confidence inspiring because it really handles any chunk very well. It is a bike that has a very good suspension, both in the way the suspension is set up, the new lower link driven VPP, as well as the tuning of the shock, gives you great cush over just gnar and chunk. It's really confidence inspiring. You can really just blast through that stuff and kind of let the bike handle a lot of it. So I think the Bronson is part of the new breed of mountain bikes that we're going to be seeing coming out. I rode the Pivot 429, Trail 429. This is the new one for 2019 that was released mid-2018. Of course, the Bronson is also a 2019 model year, released mid-2018. And they both have this same general sense that they're very stiff, which leads to the bikes feeling very intuitive, feeling very much an extension of you as opposed to you being on something. Makes them immediately responsive to inputs from the rider, as well as makes the rider understand what the trail is doing underneath of it. They are the new kind of geometry, which is longer front centers and reaches, obviously short stems and wide bars, which has kind of been the standard for a couple years here now, and then tied together though with a short chainstay so that the rear end is relatively short. And I think what that does is it makes for a bike that is both able to be stable at speed, because you do have a long enough wheelbase, let's say, to make it comfortable and stable at speed on the downhills, but that length is in the front center, not the overall length of the bike. So the back end of it is still relatively short, which keeps the bike playful, fun, and flickable. Now, if you are looking for a dedicated just speed machine, then you may want to go with something with even a longer wheelbase and a longer rear end. But I think for most of us that don't race, that want to go as fast as we can on a trail, just because, well, that's the fun part, who want to be able to go around turns as quickly as possible, manual bike as easily as possible, pop off of things along the trail because it's fun to do. For that sort of thing, I think the longer front centers and reaches with the short chainstay is a really good combo. The other thing I like about this bike is they haven't gone overboard with the bottom bracket height. It's not ridiculously low. It is lower and low enough that it makes the bike corner really well and allows your weight to be down in the bike nicely, but it's not so low that you're constantly bashing it when you're going over gnar or chunk, which I appreciate, because there's a movement where some of these bikes, I think the bottom brackets are just too low for real world riding if you're on any sort of trails that are not sort of machine groomed. If you're relatively flat trails with jumps and stuff and berm turns, they're fine, but when you start getting on trails with a lot of chunk, a lot of rock, and that suspension is really working, the real low bottom brackets can be too low. I think, you know, the other thing is with these bikes, because we don't have front derailleurs anymore, that's allowing the manufacturers to and the engineers to really beef up that bottom bracket area, as well as make the rear triangles the same on both sides and really strong. And that just creates that real stiffness and that real sturdiness of the bike that you definitely feel when you're riding, and you feel it as the inputs being immediate to the bike, and as I said, being able to tell exactly what the trail is doing underneath from the bike, while still getting the suspension working so that it's not bashing you as you're going along. And of course the dropper seat posts as well allow for these for the engineers to make these steeper angle seats, so that when you're pedaling, the pedaling platform is really well positioned, but yet it doesn't mess you up when you're going downhill, because you can just drop the seat and get your weight back where it needs to be still for heading downhill. So, you know, those innovations, the one-by system, the dropper seat post, I think have allowed for some of these changes, as well as just changes in the technology, I'm sure, of carbon and that sort of thing. But they all combine to make these bikes that are, and we're going to be seeing, that are going to be really stiff, and the geometry is going to be really dialed in, and they're finally, I think, getting to the point now where the mountain bikes are going to all be really good. I mean, I think it's going to be hard, you're going to be hard pressed probably to find a bad mountain bike made these days by the big manufacturers, the ones that we know do it right. A quick overview of the specs of the bike that I demoed and that I will probably buy. It was the Carbon C, which is the slightly less expensive but slightly heavier Carbon R build. You can go to the website and find out the exact specs on it. Just a couple of things: the Carbon C versus the Carbon CC. To me, unless you're a racer, I don't know why you go with Carbon CC. It's a lot of extra money for a few grams weight savings. If you want to save that weight, go hit the head before you hit the trail. Take something out of your pack, and you'll probably save the same amount of weight. If you're racing, I get it, but for me, I'm not spending any extra money. The Carbon C is an awesome frame. The R and I think all of the builds now come with the NX Eagle as the lowest group set. I will say that I am glad that the Eagle came down now to the NX. It's a fine group set, in my opinion. I was up in the mountains with this demo and never lacked for any gearing options. It doesn't have quite as high a gear as the GX Eagle. The GX has a 10 tooth cog as the smallest. This one has an 11. Maybe, I guess, I don't know, there might be some downhill where you're missing that, but I couldn't find one where I felt like I didn't have a low enough gear, a high enough gear. And of course, the Eagle comes with the big 50-tooth cassette, just like with the big 50-tooth ring, just like the GX Eagle. The main difference I could tell from looking at them online is that, in addition to just that extra small chain ring on the GX Eagle, the weight difference, there's obviously weight savings with the GX Eagle, which again, to me, it's not significant enough to matter. when I wear this one out, I am likely to go to the new XTR, I think it's called the 9100 or something, but the new Shimano XTR 12 speed, which has a 51 tooth, just because looking at the cassette, the drops, the changes between the middle ones, I like a little bit better than the Eagle, but I'm certainly going to ride this NX for now. Shifting wise, maybe there's a little crispiness. Maybe the GX is a little crisper. That's what I'm trying to say. Then the NX, quite frankly, I don't know. I couldn't tell. For my purposes, I think the NX is a fine group set. It came with level T brakes, which actually I'm fine with. I've ridden a number of bikes with Guide Rs that were just, I can't stand that brake. I don't know what it is. I can't say that it was just a one-off anymore because it was multiple bikes that I tried them on. I did not like them. Again, eventually at some point in time I may go to XTR brakes anyway because I like them, but certainly the level T brakes on this bike would work for a long time. The bike is pretty much set up good to go. Otherwise, I think this is a bike you can buy right out of the box and not replace anything. Personally, and I don't spend a lot of time on this stuff because I think this is very personal, I would replace the grips. I think the Santa Cruz grips are just terrible. They don't have any, they're a very hard rubber compound, so when they get wet, they get very slippery. I also would put Renthal bars on there with a 1-inch rise, just because that's what I've ridden my whole life and I like the feel of them. And I might replace the saddle. I don't know, I'd have to ride it a little bit more to see. The saddle didn't feel 100% comfortable, but it wasn't terrible either. But obviously those are all very personal choices. The Plus, which actually is probably what I will get, comes with a wider rim, 35mm rim if you get the standard, and you don't go to the carbon rims, and that is allows you to put up to 2.8-inch tires on the bike. It comes with 2.6 Minion DHF front and DHR2 rear. So that's probably what I'm going to get, primarily because I want the wider rim. I want the ability to go up to a 2.8 if I want. I think most of the time I'm probably going to keep the 2.6 on there, but in the mountains, in the fall and winter, it can get really slick and slippery, and the extra traction of the 2.8, especially in the rock gardens and stuff, can be nice. But so that's really the difference between the Plus and the non-Plus builds, is you get obviously the tire difference, but for future changes is it's the rim. So if you want the ability to run wider tires to go up to the 2.8, you should get the Plus because it does come with that that wider rim. Riding impressions. So first, let's talk about climbing. So here are my thoughts while I was on the trail after having just ridden up a fire road with a lot of kind of 5-inch diameter rocks underneath. I mean, it's rocks the entire way. There's no smooth section in the entire climb. So it's a technical climb, although there's no real big, huge lips or anything that you have to go up and over. So here you go. Here are my thoughts from the trail. So we're up on the Bronson V3. This is the 2019 Bronson. First of all, see if I can get a picture over here. There she is. I think it's a beautiful bike. 2 triangles connected by a nice linkage. Beautiful color. I think it's just a sexy bike. She's a sexy beast. But anyway, I wanted to give a step up on the climbing because I just climbed to the top of one of the trails here, and this thing climbs awesome. If you are worried about the climbing capabilities of this bike, do not be. She is a beast climbing. The lack of a flip switch on the shock makes absolutely zero difference. All I did was I locked out my fork and just pedaled, and it was awesome. So uphill performance of this bike is phenomenal. There's Peter. He's over there on a tall boy with the 29ers on it. He just got to the top, and that thing climbs really well too. So these 2 bikes are awesome. My thoughts now, after having ridden the thing all day, is that it is an excellent climber. What I think the bike does differently from the older Bronson, and the reason I'm going to use this as a good reference, as many of you may have ridden the older Bronson, the V2, is this bike, the new Bronson, stays much higher in its travel while pedaling. So it feels almost more like a pivot bike or a DW with a DW Link. So when you're pedaling, there's just very little bob with the suspension. It stays really high and really just smooth the entire time. But yet, it does have really good small bump cush, and when you're going over those, when you're riding up those trails that have a lot of small rocks and things, it is giving you nice grip. The suspension is working, so it's giving you nice grip over those, but the bike doesn't bob. It stays really high. I don't know how they do it. Suspension magic is my belief, but it really works well. It makes it for an incredibly awesome technical climber. Some other times where I did have larger shelves and lips and things like that to go up and over, it was awesome. It was great on the slow rock crawling, some of the pedal trails where you're not going super fast. You got to pedal through the whole thing, and there's just a lot of chunder and gnar underneath of you. It just pedals through that stuff awesomely. It does not have a flip switch on the rear shock. I will tell you, do not worry about it. Do not be afraid the fact that it doesn't have one. It is absolutely unnecessary. I never once, while on the trail, wished that I had one. The only time I wished I had it was at the end. We had a short little, maybe half-mile road pedal back to the car. It was up a hill, and on the tarmac, I wished I had the flip switch. But when I buy my bike, it ain't ever going to see more than a quarter or a half mile of tarmac ever anyway, so I don't really care. On the trail, the flip switch on this thing is unnecessary because it stays so high in its travel. The only time I think that you have an issue with it is when if you have a rock that has a fairly high crest and you go over it, sometimes the bottom bracket there will bottom out on the crest, and you sometimes can't pedal, obviously, because even if you're not bottoming out, your pedals are very low, so you got to sort of spin up before you get to it, roll over the crest, and then pedal back get back on the pedals once you're on the other side of it. But that's most full suspension bikes are like that. And I don't think that's anything particularly unique to the Bronson, but that is probably about the only issue with the pedaling that I would say. If you watch one of my video here about the pedally parts and gnar, that you will see that through that entire time, there was only one time where I had that issue where the bottom bracket hit going over a rock. Maneuverability. Okay, so this is one place where I think this bike really shines, personally. This is a very, very maneuverable, flickable bike. The bike, I think because of the 27.5-inch wheels instead of the 29ers, is very easy to move around and to keep in control, especially when you're going slower in the chunky sections. Slower rock gardens, uphill on rocky technical climbs where you've got to constantly be moving it and changing your line to avoid some of the huge things that you just can't get over and try to pick your line. It's real easy to control. I never felt like I got into that. Once it got offline, I couldn't bring it back, kind of thing. Yet it rolled over everything extremely well, and I think I would chalk that up to the suspension. Like I said, it does have very nice cush in the top of the stroke, even though it sits high when you're pedaling. So it really is giving you a lot of nice cushioning, as well as a lot of nice traction when you're climbing and when you're riding over that stuff. So so maneuverability is really good on this thing. Flickability, man, turns on this thing are just so much fun. It's to me like the closest bike to a BMX that I've ever ridden. It rides around corners to me very similar to the old Bronson, the Bronson V2, the back end, because it is basically the same size back end. It's a 430 millimeter rear chainstay length, so it's really flickable. You come around turns and you can just really just skid that back end around. I felt like the front end, though, going around tighter turns was a little bit more controllable than the old V2 Bronson. The old Bronson, I felt sometimes would wander a little bit, and I sort of had to bring it back under control. I mean, not terribly, but I got a little bit more wander on that one than I felt like I had on this one. Why that is, I'm not sure, because this new Bronson has about a 1 degree slacker head tube angle, so you would think that would make it wander a little bit more. However, this bike also has a steeper seat angle, so that may be making up for it. Also, this frame is super stiff. I think that may lend to that as well. Then that is one thing about the back end. While it feels sort of the same as the old Bronson in terms of its flickability, I will say that it feels stiffer. And I think that is because they've beefed up the bottom bracket, and they've also now have matching, the rear triangle is the same on both sides, so it has lateral stiffness that's equal on both sides of the bike, whether you're going left or right. I think it just makes that rear that much stiffer, which means your inputs are immediately connected to that bike. So you move your hips, shift your weight through the pedals, and it transfers it immediately to that back end. So I think that's why. I don't really know, I'm not an engineer, but that's how it feels to me. But great maneuverability, great flickability, which of course to me adds a lot to that fun factor. That's why I say it's a fun bike. That's part of the reason. And downhill. Downhill, this bike is just the bomb. It is so much fun. It just gives you supreme confidence in handling big, chunky sections. You just sit back on that thing, you drop your seat post, you put your weight back, and you can just take lines that you wouldn't take otherwise. You can a lot of times pick your line for the corner, and the bike will just handle whatever the terrain is underneath, and allows you to take the line based on the curve that you really want to take. You can fly downhills on this thing to the extent that all of a sudden you're going, oh my god, I got a turn coming up, and you're not realizing just how fast you're going into that thing. It is absolutely awesome downhill. Probably kind of knew that, or figured that was going to be the case given the suspension setup, and given that it sort of mirrors now the Nomad's suspension. But I will tell you from first-hand experience, it's awesome downhill. I will say that it's probably a little bit better downhill than the old Bronson, although I liked the old Bronson too. This one, again, because that frame is so stiff, the bike definitely feels more a part of you than mostly any other bike that I've ridden yet, to be honest with you, including the old V2. The old V2, I still felt like I was on a bike. This one, I feel like the bike and I are one. And for descending, again, that gives you just the supreme confidence, because whatever you do is immediately transferred to the bike. Whatever feedback the bike is getting from the trail, you know immediately. The best analogy I can give, I would say, is like driving an old American car, where you could turn the steering wheel like this, right, and nothing would happen. The car just keeps going straight. And then you get into a BMW, and you turn the wheel just a little bit, and the car is reacting immediately to your inputs. That's the way this bike feels overall, both the back end and when you're bombing down hills. And that just gives you this confidence that is just really, truly inspiring, and I love. My review on this, obviously extremely positive. I think it's a phenomenal bike, and I think it really does everything exceedingly well. Could be your one bike, your one quiver bike, like I say, barring the extremes of riding like cross-country racing and downhill racing. For everything else, it pretty much, I think, could handle this. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the bike. I hope this helps. Check out the trail footage if you're interested in this bike, because I tried to put a fair amount on there so you can really see what I'm talking about. Because I find when I read other people or watch other people's reviews or read them, that using these general words to try to describe how a bike rides is tough, because these words are so subjective. And hopefully, if you watch the other two videos that I have on here, that you can see really what I mean by some of these more subjective general words. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching this. If this was helpful, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. I try to put stuff on here as much as I can. I work full time, so this is sort of just a hobby that I do. It's fun for me, and I like to pay it forward a little bit with whatever help I can give to somebody else when we're shelling out thousands of bucks for these bikes. So subscribe if it helps you, and keep an eye on my channel for other stuff. Thanks. See ya.